Okay, we were holding the bottom of Chav Zayin Amud Beis, where it says, "Umi Omar Abaye Dogim Gedule Karka Nino." So this is the middle of an inyan. What we're talking about over here is what kind of foods could you buy with the money of Ma'aser Sheni. So the Gemara says that you have a klal prat a klal. It says in the pasuk, "V'nesata kesef b'chol asher ta'ava nafshecha." That's a klal. Then it says, "Babaka batzayim bayayim b'sheichar." That's a prat, specific details. Then it says again, "B'chol asher teshalchol nafshecha." That's again a klal. So you have a klal prat a klal. And the Gemara brought two braises. What does klal prat a klal means? One braisa said, if you look at the bottom of Chav Zayin Amud Beis, one klal said, "Pri mi pri v'gedule karka." Has to be something which is produce from produce, and has to be something that comes from the ground, or at least eats from the ground, gets nourishment from the ground. Another opinion added and said that it has to be vladis haaretz. It has to be something that originates from the ground, which is an animal, which was created from the ground. So the Gemara said the nafkamina would be fish. Fish, they grow, they get their nourishment from the ground in the water, under the sea. They get their nourishment from the ground, they're considered to be gedule karka, but they weren't created from the ground. They were created from water. So that would be the nafkamina b'nigeya to whether the fish is food that could be bought from kesef meiser. So the Gemara is going to ask on this now. Could you say that Abaye holds that fish is considered to be gedule karka, that it gets its nourishment from the ground? What?
How so?
Because fish under the sea eat from the floor in the sea, so they're eating from the ground. So that's considered to be gedule karka. Gedule karka, yeah, for sure, a cow for sure. Gedule karka doesn't only mean tzemeach that grows from the ground. Anything that eats and gets its nourishment from the ground is gedule karka. That's what the Gemara said. And Chanami, in that sense, people are gedule karka. Correct? But you're not buying people for the food of Mekesef Ma'aser Sheni. But the dogim is considered to be gedule karka. That was the word the Gemara said. Frek the Gemara, if that's true, a person that eats a putisa is some kind of an insect in the water. Like arba, you get 4 malchus. And Rashi brings the psukim. There are psukim where it says al teshaktus nafshi seichem v'loy tetamu bem, and then it says again mipsoram loy sechelu v'chol hashein le'snape v'kaskesas loy sechelu. There are 4 lavin for eating an insect in the water. Nemala, if you eat an ant, which is an insect on the ground, loy kechamish, you get 5 malchus. And Rashi brings the psukim from them as well. Okay, and then if you eat a tzira, which some teach is a hornet or it's an insect that flies, like a sheish, there's actually one more pasuk, v'chol sheret sa'oif sheket suloi yachol, so you get 6 malchus. So these are the different halachas of an insect in the water, on the ground, and what flies. Now, if you're going to say that an insect in the water is also gidule karka, it eats from the ground. Petisa nami lilki mishum asheretz asheretz alaretz. So petisa, insect in the water, you should also get malchus, and it should be considered to be an insect of the ground because it eats from the ground. It's gidule karka. So why are we saying that it only gets 4 malchus? Why not 5 like an ant? So the Gemara says, Elam Ravina, you're right. We're going to have to change the pshat here. So Ravina said, Oifis ikebenayu. The difference in the 2 ways that the Gemara learned before, the klal prat klal, the difference will be regarding oifis, regarding insects that fly, or not now. Here we're not talking about insects. Actually, we're talking about birds. Could you buy bird meat with the food of Ma'aser Sheni? The one that says that the money of Ma'aser Sheni has to be peri mi peri, and has to be growing from the earth. Birds eat from the ground. The one that says that you could only buy with the money of Ma'aser Sheni something that originates from Sheshisim Ebreishis, that it was created from the ground. The birds were not created from earth, they were created from mud. The Eibishter mixed earth and water from the mud. That's what the birds are created from. So therefore, you can't buy from Ma'aser Sheni from them. Sagt the Gemara, Namanda Marbi Oifis, the one that says that he could even buy Oifis from the money of Ma'aser Sheni, my timing. What's the reason why he learns the klal prat klal in this way to include birds? Man the mamit oifis, and the one that says that we are mamait, we exclude birds, you can't buy it, my timing. Why does he hold that you exclude birds? So this is all based on a klal uprat klal. But the Gemara now is going to explain what their argument about this klal uprat klal is about. Right? So the klal uprat klal is the pasuk. You have the pasuk over here the previous Amid, Ois Aleph in most Gemaras, you have the pasuk where you have a klal prat. The klal, the Gemara now explains how this works. Manda marbi oifis kasavar, the one that says that we include birds as well holds klala basra dafka. The second klal, that is dafka, meaning when the Torah writes the klal prat klal, really the main focus is on the second klal, meaning that it's coming to add, to include more than the prat. So therefore, prat klal. So therefore, this is a klal, a prat, and then a klal. Nasa klal meisif ala prat. When the Torah writes the klal after the prat, really the klal is coming to add more than the prat. Ve'esrabaluhu kol mili. And therefore, we'll marba everything, that you could buy everything with the money of Ma'aseh Sheni. V'ahani klola kama, the fact that it's a klal, a prat, a klal, there's another klal before, so that first klal is effective to say, lemuti kol delei damile mishnei tzdadim. If there's something that doesn't have a comparison to the foods that are mentioned here in the pasuk in two ways, what are the two ways? It has to be peri mi peri, has to be something which is produce from produce, and it has to be something which grows from the ground. If it's not daim mishnei tzadin, so then it's not included. But otherwise, we say that because the last klal is coming to be meisif, we're meisif even birds as well. The one that says that we don't include the birds, he holds no klal kama dafka. It's the first klal that's dafka. So therefore klal uprat. We have to look at this pasuk as a klal uprat. Ve'im b'chlal ela mashe befrat. Whenever you have a klal and then the Torah follows with a prat, the prat is coming to limit and to say only what's specified in this prat. Haniyin midachrini loy. Whatever is in this prat and nothing else. The fact that the Torah adds another klal afterwards, so it is showing that the Torah wants to include more, but what we include here is much more restricted. Only when you have something which is going to be compared to these details in three ways, that will be included. What are the 3 points? Peri mi peri, has to be produce from produce, has to be something that gets its nourishment from the ground, and has to be vlad mevladis haaretz. Has to be something that originates from the ground. That's something that's included in this limud. If not, it's not included. So it depends how you structure the klal prat klal. That shows you how restrictive we are, how limited we say we are with what you could buy with the money of Ma'aseh Sheni. Okay, Gemara and Daf Chavches. The Gemara continues, or by the 2 dots, the Gemara explains now other details. Benegea.
That Rashi, I would have thought bloody haaretz means animals who survive on grass which grows from the ground.
No, right, that's not the pshat. Okay. Sagt the Gemara, Amar Rav Yehuda b'shmei Rav Shmuel bar Shilish m'smei Rav. So going back now to the different foods that can be used to make an Eruv Tchumen. Ma'arvin, okay, if anyone has the English, you don't have the English over here? Okay, see if I can, there's a lot of translations over here, and these I'll try my best to translate them, but I'm not sure if it's going to be possible. Okay. Okay, over here it can't connect. Okay, let's see. Sagt the Gemara. Me'arvim b'papuin. You're allowed to do an Eruv with papuin, which is what? It's some kind of, Rashi says, kakuli. Okay, I saw the taich yesterday, but I don't remember what papuin are.
He says, Mini Yerok is ru'uyim la'achila.
Okay, so there you go. So even the art scroll says, Mini Yerok is ru'uyim la'achila. Okay, but the point is that it's some kind of inferior, it's not a regular vegetable. It's something that people don't usually eat. And that's the chiddush that he says, Ma'arvim b'papuin, or b'chalag loiglois. And also chalag loiglois. What's that? Clover. If I remember correctly, it's called clover. I have no idea what it is. Anyone knows what clover is?
Never heard of 4-leaf?
English porcelain. He says English porcelain.
Porcelain. Oh, no, maybe I'm confusing. Good gedonias is clover. Or good gedonias.
Coriander.
Good gedonias is coriander.
It says Banglit coriander.
Okay, so I'm coriander. Okay.
Coriander is the seeds that you have in the breads.
In breads.
Bread they have seeds. No, you don't find it. You don't find it anymore these days.
Okay. Avoloi b'chaziz, but not with chaziz. What's chaziz? So Rashi says chaziz is when the tvua grows and it's not ripe, it's green grain, so you can cut it then and eat it. Usually animals eat chaziz. It's not really foods for human beings, so therefore you can't use chaziz for the food of a native. Voloi b'kafniyos, and not kafniyos. Kafniyos, Rashi says, are dates that are not ripe. Or b'gud gedaniyos, so the Gemara goes back to good gedaniyos. So he said good gedoniyos is coriander, good gedoniyos is mima arvin. Could it be used for an eruv? V'atanya good gedoniyos merube bonim, people that have children, yeichlu. They could eat them. Chasuchei banim, people that don't have children, lo yaichlu. You shouldn't eat them. It's not good for a person that wants to have children. And then it says, Vim hukshu lezera, if it becomes so hard that there's already seeds that are there, af merube banim lo yaichlu. It's not edible. Even people that have children should not eat them. They're not good for you. So you see over here that good gedoniyos is not food that you eat. So how can you use it for a native? So the Gemara says, Tirgema ashalei hukshu lezera. So we're talking about such good gedoniyos that are not so hard, and it is edible. Umerube banim, and a person that has children, so it's not harmful for him to eat it. Or you can say, according to what we learned in the Mishnah, even a person that doesn't have any children and he doesn't usually want to eat this, so still it's good for him for an eidif. Why? Because people that have children do eat it. Didn't we learn in the Mishnah? A yid could use wine, a nazir that is, could use wine, even though for him it's not drinkable. And for Yisrael, he can use truma, even though it's not edible for him. He's not allowed to eat it. Even if it's not food for you, but someone else is allowed to eat it, it's good for the eiduf. Even if you can't eat it, but someone else can eat it, so therefore it's good food for an eiduf. No. It's not fit for any yid. Another answer the Gemara says there's a different kind of dugdeganiyos. Kikamarav bahande kuki madoi. The good gedoniyos that comes from modai, from parasomodai. So it's a different kind of coriander which is edible for everybody. Okay. Now the Gemara goes back to chaziz. So as I said, chaziz is this green grain before it's ripe. Chaziz loy. Is it true that you can't use chaziz for an eidov? V'omerav yudah amarav kishos. Kishus, which is a kind of something that grows,
He says
hops, okay, hops that grows on thorn bushes, and it doesn't even have roots in the ground. It just grows on the thorn bushes. That's kishus. The chaziz and this green grain, ma'arvim behen, you could use it for an eiduf. And you make a bracha on it by the priyadama. So after the Gemara, loikashia. When Rav said that you can't use chaziz for Eirov, it's before he came to Bavel. And and this is after he came to Bavel. He came to Bavel, he saw people are eating chaziz. So then Rav said you can use it for an Eirov. Because he sees people in Bavel eating it, so therefore he changes his opinion about chaziz. If most people don't eat chaziz, it's not edible for. It's made for animals to eat. So it's batla daitam. You should say that the fact that some people in Bavel do this shouldn't make any difference. And the Gemara brings an example where we see batla daitam. V'atani we learned in Abraisa, pull beans, vasoira, barley, vahatilson. What's tilson? You have the So what's tilson? Okay, also some kind of a vegetable.
Fenugreek.
Fenugreek. Is that how it's translated? Fenugreek? You ever heard of that? Okay. Shazaron liyerek. So if they were planted and you want to use the leaves, so batla daita it's a kolodam. People no one plants these things and uses them for their leaves. So even if one individual is batla daita. Lefichach zaron chayiv. For the zera, if a person's eating the zera, so then for that he's chayiv and meiser. It's talking about it here. V'yarkon potter, but for the leaves you potter of meiser for the leaves. It's not edible. Hashachalayim. How about shachalayim? What's shachalayim? Cress, if I remember correctly. V'hagargir, which is arugula. Shazaron liyerek. If you planted it for the leaves, misastrim. You are chayiv and meiser because the leaves of it are edible. You have to give ma'isa of the leaves and of the seeds. Zoron lezera, you planted it for the seeds. Misasrin zera v'yerek, you have to give ma'isa from the seeds and from the leaves. The point is that these things, both the leaves and the seeds, are edible. So why did the Gemara bring this brayso? Here we see the concept of batla daita. It's a kolodam, something that people don't eat, and you eat it this way. It doesn't matter. So the same thing should be with the chaziz. Why are we saying when Rav came to Bavel, he changed his opinion? So the Gemara, Kikam Rav. So yeah, you're right. The answer over here is when Rav said that chaziz is edible, he was talking about b'dignunaisa. He's talking about chaziz that grows in a garden, not the regular chaziz that when you have a field of wheat and it's before it's ripe, that's not edible. But this is a different kind of tvua that's planted in a garden and it's edible even when it's still green. Zog the Gemara. Zera gargir lemai chazer. The zera of gargir, the zera that we just spoke about, which is from the arugula. Before we called it yagarga, arugula. So what is it roi for? What do you use it for? Rabbi Yochanan sheken rishayim shelei hoyel and pilpulin. Earlier generations, they didn't have spices. Sorry. They would grind it and they would dip roasted meat in it. So they used it as a spice.
Really, that's very common.
Yeah, right. Now the Gemara brings a story, and this is something we had in the Gemara in Brachas. And a lot of this Gemara here is going to be from Gemara Brachas. Rab Zeire ki ava cholish megir say, Rab Zeire, when he was weak and he couldn't learn, so he still wanted to do a psam mitzvah, hava ozl v'yosef a-pischa de Rav Yehuda Barami. He would sit on the doorway, by the up door of Rav Yehuda Barami. Omar, he said, ki nafki v'ayli rabbanon, the rabbanon will go in and out, Eikim mekamayu, I will stand up for the Talmidei Chachamim, v'akabo bu'agra, and I'll get schar for standing up for Talmidei Chachamim. No fakasi yenuka de beirav. So a young student, a child from the yeshiva came out. Amalei. So Rab Zeire said to him, "My agmarach rabach. What did your teacher teach you today?" Amalei. He's taught me as follows: Kishus beire priyadama. The bracha is beire priyadama. Chaziz shahakal niye betvarei. The bracha is shahakal niye betvarei. Amalei. So Rab Zeire said to him, Adarabba. It should be on the contrary. Ipcha mistavra. Logically, it's the opposite. Hi me'ara kamarbi. The chaziz is green grain before it's ripe, but it grows from the ground. So the bracha should be by the priyadama. V'hai ma'avira kamarbi. The kishus is hops, like you said. It grows on thorn bushes, but it doesn't have roots in the ground. So the bracha should be shahakal. It grows from the air. So it should be the opposite. But the Gemara says v'hilchase ki yenuka de beirav. Lahalacha, this yenuka that repeated from what he'd learned in the yeshiva was right. And the Gemara explains why. My time, hi gemar peri. The kishos is ripened. It's growing from the ground, and you're eating it like the derech that you eat it. It's ripe, so you make a bracha adama. V'hai lav gemar peri. The chaziz is green grain, and it's not ripe, so you don't make a bracha adama. You make a bracha shahakal. It's similar to what we learned in brachas when you get to the bracha of adama. If you eat a vegetable which is usually eaten raw, and you eat it cooked, so you make a bracha shahakal. And a vegetable that's eaten dafke cooked, and you eat it raw, you also make a bracha shahakal. So you're eating a vegetable and it's not ripe, so you make a bracha shahakal. Now the Gemara explains weiter. This that you said, that the chaziz grows from the ground, and the kishos, the hops, does not grow from the ground, doesn't have roots in the ground. So Gemara says, Loi, it's not true. It also gets its nourishment from the ground. Kishus nami me'ara karabi. It takes its nourishment from the ground. Why? The hakachazinon, the katlina lelehizmise umaisi kishusa. If you cut off the bush, the thorn bush that it grows on, so then the kishus that's on it will die as well. So you see that even though it doesn't have roots in the ground, but it takes its nourishment from this bush that it's on, that gets its nourishment from the ground. So therefore you make a bracha hadama.
What does it mean it doesn't have nourishment from the ground? It grows from the ground. It grows on the tree that's growing on the ground.
That's basically what the Gemara is saying. So Kanira, Rab Zeire held that in order to make a bracha adama, it has to grow directly from the ground. It has to mamish have roots in the ground. And the Gemara is explaining, even if it's indirectly getting its nourishment from the ground, is also good enough to make a bracha adama. Now the Gemara goes back to the kafniyais, which are the dates that are not ripe. So before we said that we can't use it for the food of an Eiruf. So frak the Gemara, you can't use it for an Eiruf. For Hatanya, we learned in Abraisa, kor nikach bekesef maisa. So kor is shoots of branches that come out from a palm tree when it's still soft and it's edible. I think this is what people call today hearts of palm. So kor could be bought with kesef meiser, right? So we were speaking before in the Gemara about kesef meiser. It has to be food that comes from the ground. Paid. You could use it for kesef meiser. It's food. However, the halacha of tumas eichlin does not apply to it. Why not? By tumas eichlin, it has to be something which is lachatchila designated for food. Rashi brings the pasuk. These are branches. If you leave them on the tree, what happens to them? It becomes hard, like a piece of wood, like a branch. L'chatchila, it's soft, but it's not designated to be as a food, even though now it's raw to be eaten. So therefore, the tumas eichlin doesn't apply. Then it says in this braisa, kafniyos that we were speaking about, the dates that are small, they're not ripe. Nikrais bekesef maisa. It's considered to be food, and you could buy with it, with the kesef ma'aser, you can buy it. Umetama is tumas eichlin, and it's considered to be food, and it's metama tumas eichlin. Rabbi Yehuda says, "Kor hareu ke'etz." These soft branches of a palm tree, it's even though now it's soft, it's considered to be like a piece of wood l'chol dvara, for everything. El shanikach bekesef ma'aser. But now that it's soft, you could use it for kesef ma'aser. It's not very clear regarding the core what he's arguing on the Tanakama. The Gemara will explain. Now kafniyos, again he talks about the kafniyos, these unripe dates. Harehen kepri l'chol devrayim. It's considered to be like a peri for everything. El shepeturais mina ma'aser. But from ma'aser, you're going to be potter from ma'aser. Okay, for ma'aser, the reason why you potter from ma'aser is because it's not ripe yet. One of the conditions to be chayav in ma'aser is that the fruits, the produce, has to be ripened. So these are not fully ripened, so you potter from ma'aser. The point is, what do you see over here? That these kafniyos you can buy with kesef ma'aser, these kafniyos. So why are we saying that the kafniyos can't be used, which are the unripe dates? Why are we saying that you can't use them for eruv, for the food of an eruv? And for the Gemara, Hasam b'de nischeni. Over there, it's talking about nischeni. So Rashi explains you have two different kinds of dates that are not ripe. There are certain dates that are not ripe; they're never becoming ripe. This is how they grow. They're harder dates. They never get ripe. So that's how people eat them. So those are the dates that it says that they're considered to be food, and it's chayav and you can buy it with kesef ma'aser. Before, we were talking about dates that were not ripe, but if you leave them on the tree longer, they could become ripe. So therefore, you're not going to be chayav in ma'aser for them, or again, you can't buy them with kesef ma'aser, and you can't use it for an eruv either. Frek the Gemara, if so, you're telling me we're talking over here about dates that this is how they grow, they never become riper than this. Bahal leimer Rabbi Yehuda pturis min ma'aser. Rabbi Yehuda would say that it's potter from ma'aser. Why should it be potter from ma'aser? This is how it grows. It's fully ready. It doesn't get riper than this. Vatanya Rabbi Yehuda clearly said lehuskuru page b'siyoni. Page b'siyoni are figs that come from a place b'siyoni that they don't get ripe. Elo leinyan ma'aser legabi ma'aser bulvad that are chayiv in ma'aser. Pagi b'siyoni, and then he said Pagi b'siyoni va'ahini de tuvina. Ahini de tuvina are these kafniyos that we're talking about. There are these dates that grow in the city tuvina and they never get ripe. Chayavim b'ma'aser. They're chayav in ma'aser because that's the maximum that they grow. So how can we say that Rabbi Yehuda, he was talking about dates that will never get ripe and they're potter from ma'aser? Why are they potter from ma'aser? This is the maximum that they grow for. And for the Gemara, you're right. This teretz that we gave is not a good teretz. We're not talking about these kind of dates that will never get ripe. Well, the Inyan tumas oichlin shani. Over there, he was saying legabi tumas oichlin that for tumas oichlin it's not considered to be food. That's legabi what we were saying, that these kafniyos, when it said before that the kafniyos are considered to be a fruit, that's only legabi tumas oichlin. Kedam Rabbi Yochanan said, hoyel v'roy lemaskan al yedei ha'oir. Since these kafniyos, the way they are, they're not edible. But you could put them in fire and make them sweet, and then you'll be able to eat them. So therefore, legabi tumas oichlin, it's considered to be food. So what the Gemara is saying is, using this food for an eruv, it has to be roy to be eaten as is. You put down this food in that place for an eruv, you didn't sweeten it in fire. You're just putting it as is, so that's not edible. So it can't be used as an eruv. When it said in the Braisa that it's considered to be food, legabi tumas oichlin, that's because it could potentially be prepared in fire to make it sweet, to be used to eat. So therefore, the svara that Rabbi Yochanan said, that's something that could be prepared and sweetened. So it's tamei tumas oichlin, and we apply the same thing over here. The Gemara brings the source where Rabbi Yochanan said this idea. Where did Rabbi Yochanan say that something that's not edible right now, but you could sweeten it, that the tumas oichlin applies to it? Rabbi Yochanan said regarding this halacha. The Tanya we learned shkedim hamorim, bitter almonds. Ketanem, when they're small, chayavin. They're chayav in ma'aser. And the reason is because when they're still small, so they're not bitter yet. When they get big, when they get fully ripe, then they become bitter. Gedoylem, so when they become big, peturin. Then they're potter from ma'aser. Mesukim, sweet, regular, edible almonds. Gedoylem, chayavim. When they're fully ripe, they're chayav in ma'aser, because they're fully ripe. And ketanim, when they're small and they're not ripe yet, peturin, they're potter from ma'aser. He says in the name of his father regarding the bitter almonds, zeh v'zeh l'ptur. Bitter almonds, whether they're small and they're not bitter yet, whether they're large and they are bitter, they're always going to be potter. What's the reason? When they're small, they're not fully ripe yet. When they're large and they're fully ripe, they're bitter. So either way, they're potter from meiser. V'amri, others said, no. He said, zeh v'zeh l'chiyuv. The bitter almonds, whether they're small, whether they're large, they're going to be chayiv. And the Gemara is going to explain this in a second. But first the Gemara says, Amar Rabbi Loya. So Rabbi Loya said, in the Bachas Meisef, Amar Rabbi Yehuda, in the name of Rabbi Yehuda, Hoyre Rab Chanina b'tzipayri kedivrei ha'omer zeh v'zeh l'ptur. He paskin like the opinion that said that the bitter almonds, whether they're big, whether they're small, either way it's going to be potter. Okay, now the Gemara says, the bitter almonds, when they're big and they're bitter, what could you use them for? So as we said, when they're small, and chanami, they're not ripe yet, but they're edible. So therefore they're chayiv and meiser. But once they're big and they're bitter, so what are they edible for? Why are they chayiv and meiser? So here's what Rabbi Yechanan said is halacha. Rabbi Yechanan, hoyel v'roy l'maskan al yedei ha'oir. That even though now they're bitter, you could put them in fire and sweeten them, and therefore it's chayiv and meiser. So we apply the same thing that we said before when we get to tumas oichlin, that any food that's not edible, but you could sweeten it in fire and make it edible, the halacha of tumas oichlin applies to it. Now the Gemara comes back to something else that we mentioned before, kur, which was the soft branches of the palm, hearts of palm. Rabbi Yehuda says, Kor hareyu ke'etz l'chol dvarav. This kor, even while it's soft, it's considered to be like a hard piece of wood, because if it stays on the tree, it becomes hard. It's ke'etz l'chol dvarav. It's not a food. Elo shenikach bekesef meiser. While it's soft and it's edible, you could buy this with the money of meiser. What Rabbi Yehuda is saying is the exact same thing as the Tanakama. The Tanakama also said that the core could be bought with kesef meiser. So the Tanakama also held that regarding all other halachas, it's considered to be like a piece of wood, and only from meiser is it considered to be food. So what's the difference between the Tanakama and Rabbi Yehuda? Amar Abaye, so Abaye answers, Sholkoi v'tognoi ikke beinayu. The nafkamina between the Tanakama and Rabbi Yehuda is, if you take this core and you boiled it in water for a long time, or you fried it. So the shaila is, if you boil it or fry it, even when it's hard and it's not edible, do you say that then this is food that could be bought with kesef meiser? Because now you made it edible. You fried it, you boiled it in the water. That's the machlokes of here. Right? So the Tanakama says that you can't. The Tanakama says that you could buy it with kesef meiser, and Rabbi Yehuda said, "Kor harehu ke'etz l'chol devarav." The reason why he's adding that emphasis is to tell you that if you boil it or fry it, then you can't. Even then, you can't buy it with kesef meiser. The Gemara brings a source where you can't say this nafkamina. Would anybody hold that if you prepared it, you boiled it, you fried it, that you wouldn't be able to buy this with kesef meiser now that it's edible? Vatanya, we learned in a braisa, ha'oir, the hide of an animal, va'ashilya, the placenta of an animal. Ein metamen tumas eichlin. It's not considered to be food. It's not edible, so the tumas eichlin doesn't apply. Oyer sheshalkai, hide of an animal that was boiled very well. Vishilya shechishiv aleh, and the placenta of an animal that a person is preparing and designating to eat for food. Metamen tumas eichlin. So now that you prepared it, or it says actually regarding the shilya, even if you just designated it in your mind to eat, it is metamen tumas eichlin. So we see a clear braisa that once you prepared it, it becomes tumas eichlin. Sagt the Gemara, El amarov ikke beinayu bracha. The chiluk between the Tanakama and Rabbi Yehuda regarding the core is not if you prepared it. Once you prepare it for food, it's for sure considered to be food. But the nafkamina will be what bracha you make in it. The itmar, we learned the machlokes amiroim regarding the core, and we had this whole inyan over here we had in the Gemara brachas. Core, what's the bracha of these soft branches of a palm tree? Rav Yehuda bayre pri adama. Rav Yehuda says the bracha is bayre pri adama. Shmuel amar shahakal ni'eh b'dvarei. Shmuel says the bracha is shahakal ni'eh b'dvarei. Because it's not made, it wasn't planted to be eaten. You plant a palm tree. you're going to eat the dates, but the branches, they're going to eventually get hard. That's not what you planted it for. That's not what the tree is made for. So the fact that you take it off when it's soft, you make a bracha shahakal nir b'dvarei. So this is the machlokes also. The Gemara now is saying this is also the machlokes here in the Braisa between the Tanakama and Rabbi Yehuda. The Tanakama holds that you make a bracha adama, and Rabbi Yehuda holds you make a bracha shakal nir b'dvarei. So the Gemara, Rabbi Yehuda by the pri adama. Rabbi Yehuda says the bracha is by the pri adama. Uchlu. Right now it's soft, so it's food that's growing from the ground by the pri adama. Shmuel amashakal nir b'dvarei. Shmuel says the bracha is shahakal kivin shehasayfei lahakshos. Since you're eating a branch which is going to become hard like a piece of wood, you can't make the bracha by the pri adama. If you're going to eat it now, it's not chatchila designated to eat this way, so therefore you make the bracha shahakal. Amalei Shmuel Rav Yehuda. So Shmuel was arguing with Rav Yehuda, but Shmuel said to Rav Yehuda, Shinana, sharp one, kavaseich mistavra. Like your opinion, it's more logical. Even though he argued with him, but he told him, like your opinion, it's more logical. Why? It's a radish that eventually becomes so hard and you can't eat it. But if you cut it off the ground early enough and you can eat it, then we make a bracha by the pri adama. So the same thing regarding the palm branches. If you take it off when it's soft, you make the bracha by the pri adama. But the Gemara says Shmuel's comparison is not a good comparison. Why not? It's not a good comparison. Not the insha daitu the fugla. People plant radishes chatchila with the intention to eat it fugla. Fugla means when it's soft. Dikla, not the insha daitu the kura. People don't plant a palm tree to eat it when the branches are soft. The branches are not made to eat b'chlal. Okay, so therefore it's not a good comparison. Now the Gemara concludes, V'afagav the kol say Shmuel Rav Yehuda, even though Shmuel praised Rav Yehuda's opinion, but nevertheless, Hilchasik Vasei the Shmuel, we paskin like Shmuel that the bracha on the palm branches is a shahakal niyeh b'dvarei. Okay, I wonder Taki of these palm branches the Gemara is talking about refers to the hearts of palm that we eat today, and the bracha is shakal nir b'dvarei. Because this is the halacha shulchan aruch is that core the bracha is shakal nir b'dvarei.
Rabbi Google should know.
Rabbi Google should know. Okay, let's finish another few lines in the Gemara here. Guf, we brought before. Amar Rav Yehuda Marav kishus v'chaziz. So kishus, hops, and chaziz, the green grain, mo'arvim behen, you can make a native with them. Movarchan aleim by the pri adama, and the bracha is by the pri adama. Kishus. These hops, bekama, what's the size? So the shear, Rashi brings over here, it says in the Gemara later, that the shear of an Eiruvin tchumen is, it has to be enough for 2 sudas. So how much do you have to have for a shear of 2 sudas? Kedamar Rabbi Yechiel, kimloya yad, a handful. Hachanami kimloya yad. So over here as well, it has to be a handful. Chaziz bekama, that's for the kishus. Chaziz, how much does it have to be? Amarav Tuvia by Yitzchak Amarav, kimloy uzilsa deichori. As much as the bundle of a farmer. That's the size of 2 meals. Amar Rav Chilki bat Tuvia ma'arvin bekalya. You can make an eirov with kalya. So Rashi says kalya is a kelach shalesev, it's some kind of a stalk from grass. You have an English translation here for this? Okay. So the Gemara asks, kalya solkedaitach, is kalya even edible? Could you use it as an eirov? Ela biyarka the kalya, the green part that grows out of the kalya, not the stalk. V'kama, how much do you need of it for 2 meals? Rav Yechiel kimloya yad, a handful. Rabbi Yirmiyah naflek l'kiryaisa. Rabbi Yirmiyah went out to the villages, bayu minei, and they asked him, ma'ol la'arev bepulin lachin. Could you use moist beans? In other words, they're not cooked, but they're moist beans. Could you use them for a native? He didn't know what to answer. When he came into the Beis Medrash, Amrulei, they told him, Hach Yom Rabbi Yanai said, Ma'arvin bepulin lachin. You could use moist beans for an native. And the kama, how much do you have to have? Rav Yechiel kimaloya yad. You have to have a handful of moist beans.
That's 2 sudas?
That's enough for 2 sudas, right?